Hello and welcome back. In this section, we will be seeing different types of loops. And when we talk about different type of loops, first we will see a normal looping, how we can do it within internal table. So I can say IT tab, and how we can use things like where condition in that loop. And first we will try to show you the classical way or the olden way of looping into table with a work area. And we will then show you that you don't need to create a work area. You can create the work area or a temporary variable with the data keywords or this inline data keywords. And after that, we will show you some of the other loops which are not used much. So while, and we'll show you the do loop. So these are the few basic loops which we want to show you. And then we will jump into the newer syntaxes where we will see iterators. So how these iterators can be used to construct an internal table. So these are the new syntax with for iterators we will see. Then we will also see some other functionality like reduce. So this is quite complicated scenarios we will talk about. And this will be the new part where the new codes we see. And this is the previous way of doing things which was already there with the ABAP, except this data keyword. Now there were some of the things which we will not talk about, like the internal table with the header line. So what is that? So in previous cases we have internal table with a header line, and this header line was used to loop. So those scenarios we will not talk about because there are multiple scenarios which can come up. We'll generally talking the scenarios which you will be using in your code, and also the new syntax which you will be predominantly using in your code. So let's get down to the development. Okay, so I will create a variable. So I will say data purchase order, type standard table of, and we have already seen this particular table a lot. And in the previous sections, we also compared with the sorted table and the hash table. So all that thing we did. And here I'm going to use this particular table which we created, the SAP HANA database table. I'm going to refer to this particular table to create my internal table. And also I'm going to create a work area. Now the common practice of creating work area is not used in the new syntax, but this is the olden way or the classical way of doing loops. I'm going to show you first. So I will say work area, and you can call it work area or you can call it line of PO table, which will be much more clear to understand. And I will say, okay, like line of, and this syntax we have already discussed that what is the like, and we have in the previous sections also used like line of syntax. Okay, so it will basically create a single row of this particular table, and this row is something which we will use to loop into. Now we need to first capture certain data within this table. So what I can do is I can say select star, so all the rows from the table which we are referring and creating the structure into table, and the table name here is the PO table or purchase order for short table. Now at the rate we have used so that this PO underscore table context the SQL will find from the ABAP, and I can say get up to 5 rows. Now I'm doing this because sometimes you have a lot of data in your table and you don't want to really bring thousands of records just for the purpose of your practice, unless you are doing the practice for your scalability. So what I can do is I can say, okay, loop at the table name, which is PO underscore table into, and what I'm trying to say with into is that when you loop it, so we have this particular table. So I'm just going to explain this for those developers who have not used previously the loop command. If you have previously used the loop, then it's better to skip this part and go directly to where we code. We come back to the editor. So what happens is, this is internal table. The internal table has many rows, and what I'm trying to do here is I have created a line here, and this line is exactly the structure of this particular table. So if this particular table is let's say itab internal table, and this is line, and short for li, and it for short for internal table, and it has column 1, column 2, and column 3, and the line also then will have the column 1, column 2, and column 3. So when I try to loop within this particular table, then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to then iterate over the first row, second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row, and with the first iteration, the first row will be copied to this line, and the second row will be copied to this particular line, and in third and fourth and so on till the end. So how it manages the end and all, it internally deals, or the loop command automatically internally handles that. We have to mainly focus to use this line, and this line will have individual values of that particular iteration. Okay, so I hope this is clear. We will be basically then using this line underscore PO underscore table to store the intermediate iterations value. Okay, so that's how the loop actually works. And to end the loop, I say end loop. So within that particular loop and end loop, you will have your code. And if I just want to write in the console few columns, so what I can do, I can say, okay, out.write, and here let me put this particular line.po, and I can basically add this minus sign, and automatically it will show me what are the different columns which are possible. So I can say purchase stock, just print purchase stock, and then print the description, and also print the status. So these three things we will print in the console, and save, activate, and run the code. And you can see that it basically prints. So what I'm going to do also, I'm going to just create a simple separator which will allow us to see things clearly, that okay, first iteration happened, and there's this star which got printed in the second and third. So save, activate, run the code. And I'm going to also clear the console and run the code. And you can see that in the first iteration, one product A and 1 got printed. In the second, the purchase stock number is 2, product B and 1, and so on till the 4 product we have. Now, the data which we have within this table is only 4. So even if we try to select up to 5 rows, it is not going to add new data. So that's why we have 1, 2, 3, 4 records which got printed within our console, and the loop basically iterated through the entire table. So you can just verify this by having this debugging point here. And if I try to switch to debugging perspective and refresh the breakpoint, and if I run this code, then if I check this table, then double click this particular table, or actually the table is here, PO underscore table, and here you can see in the bottom right corner there are 4 records what we have. And this loop automatically detects when we are reaching the table end or the beginning, so you don't have to really handle that. The loop automatically handles that. Okay, so this is the plain basic simple loop. Now let me come to ABAP perspective, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change certain things which will improve this particular loop. Now, for example, I can create this particular line PO with the data keywords in line itself, and I can say, okay, I just want to create this, and I will not be creating this variable on the top in the data. And also, why we need the data? We can just use the data within the SQL here. So I can just say that bye-bye to the data declaration, and still my code will work. So let's save, activate, and run the code. And you can see that we have exactly the same output. We have the PO table created, and we have the line of that particular table created with the data keywords. So that's pretty easy. We got rid of two declaration, and also within this loop we can specify a where. So this is something which you can use if you want to say, okay, I want to only loop within this particular table if my purchase doc is equal to 1. If the purchase doc is 1, then only do the loop. So I will save, activate, and run this code, and you will see that there is only one record which will get printed within this particular console, because there is only one record where the purchase doc is 1. So if I say, okay, status is equal to 1, so if that is the case, save, activate, and run the code, and also clear the console. Then you have to basically add this single quote here and activate and run the code. And you can see that for all the 4 records, the status is 1. That's the reason why we see this. Okay, so we also saw the where condition with the loop. Welcome back. Now within this section, we will first see the practical usage of field symbols, and then we will see the usage of your data reference. And then once we have got some depth understanding of field symbol, we will see some of the operations also which may be of advanced nature, and also of the data reference. At the end, we will also see how not to use data reference and field symbol both, and we will also do a simple comparison, because both of the data reference and field symbol are at some way or other dealing with memory location. So we'll try to see, okay, how you can store a data reference value in a field symbol, and simple operations we will show. Now the data reference will be also the way we use our object-oriented programming, or OOPS, in ABAP. So the ABAP programming have the class, and this class are then having objects which are instance of that particular class. These are generic informations I'm giving. We will discuss again individually about this in OOPS ABAP section. These objects are actually the reference or the data reference of type of this particular class. So in case of OOPS ABAP also, or object-oriented programming with ABAP, we will again come back to the data reference and we will explore more on that. But for now, let's continue our discussion by looking into field symbols and some of the practical usage. Okay, so first I'm going to just print this variable, and I'm going to say, okay, print lvzo PO head, and just my PO table, that is a name which we can give, and save, activate, run, and this prints the table data. And I'm going to use the loop and loop which we have already seen in the previous section. I can say loop at, and the table my PO, and this is 2 times PO we have added, so I'll just use my underscore PO underscore head, and here also my underscore PO underscore head into data, and we were creating a simple work area or line underscore PO, and then we were having this end loop. Okay, so this was the syntax which we used in the previous section, and we can out.write inside the loop the line. So nothing new, the same thing what we did earlier. And let me just run this particular code as well, clear the console, and save, activate, and run. And you can see that individual columns we are actually printing, and this is same syntax, nothing new. Now with the field symbol, how this particular loop can be improved or changed. So we have this loop, I can say loop at same the table name, loop at the table name, assigning field symbol, and here I can name the field symbol, and this will be a new name of the variable which we want to create. We can say fs, the prefix, po headline. So this will be a single line of that particular table, and based on this loop iteration, the first line will be put in the field symbol, then second, then third, and the table has 5 rows. Then based on number of rows, all rows one by one with the iteration of the loop will have the record put in this field symbol. Now I can say at the end loop. Okay, so this is the loop end loop, and let me comment these two statements so that we can only focus on this new one, and I can just say out.write and the field symbol name. Okay, so, and what you see is similar result. You see that we have the first row, second, third, fourth. So there are 4 records. So all of those got printed in the console. Now what is the advantage here, or what is the new thing here? So what I can say here is, if the purchase doc in the iteration 1 is equal to 1. If it is 1, then what you do is you basically make the status as 2. So I can then make the status as 2. Okay, so status is a character, and we can confirm this. And yes, it's a character, so we have just used the 2 here. Now when the purchase doc is 1, then we will have the status as 2. And do you think if I change the status here, will my table be changed? Because if I do the same thing with a simple loop, let's try to do that. So if I say, okay, if I'm using the previous format where my line is a simple work area or the single record or the row, if I try to do the same thing with this particular loop iteration, and I try to print my table after the loop end loop, and let me comment this code first and clear the console, save, activate, run. So if I activate this code and run this code, then you can see that I have this table where the purchase doc is 1, the status is still 1, there's nothing which is changed. The line is a temporary variable which gets cleaned after each iteration. So in the first iteration, I have this line underscore PO created and the first record is put. Then the second iteration, the line underscore PO is rewritten with the second record on the second row, and third, fourth, and so on till the end of that particular table is completed. Now, if the same thing I do in the field symbol, what do you think will be the result? Because if you understand the previous section, field symbols are pointers, and these are not actually an independent line, but these are basically pointing to the table rows. So for example, if I have this table and so we have the column 1, and this table is created a little slanted, but it is actually a table, so on. And if it has one row, second row, and so on also, then in the case of the line, we were having a separate variable which was just as same structure as the table, and we were actually copying the data there. But in case of field symbol, we are just using the reference. So it is just referencing to the first record, and then in the second iteration of the loop, the second record, and the third iteration of the loop, third record. So it's referencing or pointing to that particular records. So if I try to change the value within this particular loop of that field symbol, do you think that the reflection will happen in the actual table? So let's try to figure that. So what I will do is I will clear the console, save, activate, run. And this is something which is the difference between the field symbol looping, that in the first row, you can see that where the purchase doc is 1, the status actually got changed for the table to 2. And this is possible when you loop with field symbol. If the same thing you have to do with the normal looping into a line, then you have to then add this line in the place of the existing record. And this will require extra amount of code to be written. And you can try it out from your own side that, okay, how you will do the same thing with the normal operation of a loop where you are looping into a single line, which is a temporary record, temporary variable. And then you have to append the same thing into the table. So the advantage is clear that with the field symbol, you are directly pointing towards the table individual rows with each iteration instead of copying the record in a temporary variable and then operating on that. Okay, so this is the scenario where we have the field symbol usage in the loop. Now, similar thing you can also do with the data reference. Now, when I have my loop and loop, instead of assigning field symbol, the syntax here will be reference into, and I can create this reference variable inline lr line underscore po, my variable name, and I can then just write the entire row in the console with this particular reference. Now, as we already discussed in the last section, that to access the records, we have to use this dereferencing operator, and I have to use this arrow and the star mark, which is for dereferencing and printing the entire record. Now, if I want to do the similar operation where I check first the purchase doc, and for the purchase doc where the value is 1, change the status, then what I can do is I can basically replace this with the purchase doc and replace this star with the purchase doc. So lr underscore line underscore po arrow and then purchase doc equal to 1. If that is the case, then change the value of the status to 2. So here, after the name of the reference variable, I have this arrow and the field. Okay, so let me try to comment these two and try to save, activate, and run and see if we get the changes in the table. And what we see is that with our line number 97, we are able to print individual rows successfully. And also in line number 99, the operation got successfully done. The first record here, or the row here, the status value of that is 2. Okay, so we saw 3 ways. In the first case, we just showed you that loop and loop, if we try to do changes in the individual line, then those changes are not reflected to the table. In case of field reference, we have the changes reflected in the internal table. And in case of data reference also, the same thing is valid. The changes are reflected in the internal table. So these are the practical usage which you will find a lot in your code. You will see that the loop of the internal table is a very common scenario where you will be using field symbol or you will be using data reference. You can pick any one, and my favorite is field symbol for looping with the table, because you don't have to deal with the dereferencing every time you try to access it. But over time, what the ABAP is evolving into, you will see the usage of reference more and more. Okay, let's catch up in the next section to explore more of field symbol and data reference.